You feel it sometimes, in the quiet places where your mind drifts without permission. A pull that does not come from the present moment. A whisper shaped like an old memory. You try to shake it off. You tell yourself you have grown, that your choices now are yours alone. Yet something subtle lingers behind the movements of your life, guiding you with a hand you cannot fully see. It rises in the way you love. It echoes in the way you fear. It colors the people you trust and the ones you push away. It hides inside the choices you swear are rational, even when they come from a place much older than reason. You have walked far from the child you once were, yet the child never truly left. It sits in the shadows of your decisions. It breathes through your impulses. It waits in the corners of every turning point and whispers suggestions you mistake for intuition. When you pause long enough, you feel that presence. Small, fragile, watchful. It wants to be heard. It wants to show you the map it created long before you understood what maps were. Sometimes it feels like an ache. Sometimes it feels like a strange familiarity. Sometimes it feels like a quiet longing you cannot name. There is a moment, maybe right now, when you sense that something in you is still unfinished. A story that never received a final chapter. A wound that never found the right words to close. You sense it in the way certain situations trigger an emotion that seems too large for the present. You sense it in the way your heart tightens when someone raises their voice or pulls away too quickly. You sense it in the patterns you repeat, even when you know better. It is not weakness. It is a trail of breadcrumbs leading back to the beginning. Your childhood still speaks to you, not as a memory, but as a living presence. It shapes the tone of your inner voice. It decides what feels dangerous and what feels safe. It whispers warnings that once protected you, yet now keep you from growing. Its language is simple. Silence, tension, hesitation, hope. And you spend years trying to decode these signals without realizing they were written in a moment long gone. You carry them like a dream you half remember. A dream that feels more real than the daylight it tries to fade into. There is a strange peace in admitting this. A softening. A recognition that you were formed by forces you did not choose. That you learned survival before you learned truth. And yet, beneath it all, something still calls your name. A deeper self that wants to meet you where you are now, not where you were then. It waits behind the familiar patterns. It waits behind the defenses you built out of instinct and innocence. It waits for the moment when you will finally turn inward and ask the question you have avoided for years. What if the child inside has been guiding you all along, not to trap you, but to lead you back to yourself? Let that question stay open. Let it breathe in you. Let it guide you toward what comes next, as if a quiet door were just beginning to open in the dark. You walk through life believing your choices rise from the present moment, shaped by who you have become. Yet when you pause and listen carefully, you begin to sense another presence beneath the surface of your decisions. Something older, something quieter, something that learned the world before you had language to describe it. It is the echo of the child you once were, still holding the first impressions of reality like sacred carvings on the walls of an inner temple. Your adult mind tries to reason, explain, categorize, but the child speaks in symbols. Touch, tone, silence, a door opening or closing, the rising and falling of a breath. You carry those early impressions into every choice you make. They move beneath your thoughts like a river hidden under the forest floor. You rarely see it directly, yet it shapes the way the trees lean, the soil forms, the paths open. In the same way, your childhood shapes the way you reach for love and the way you defend against loss. It shapes the meaning you give to danger and the instinct that guides you toward safety. You think you are choosing freely, and yet the river moves before you move. Its memory shapes your steps before you consciously decide where to place your feet. There is a part of you that still remembers the first time you felt unseen. The first time you felt too much. The first time trust felt fragile. These moments become quiet architects, building inner walls, inner doors, inner rooms that you carry for decades without realizing they were designed by a child's hands. You do not revisit them, yet they revisit you in subtle ways. A certain tone of voice sparks tension. A familiar look pulls your stomach into a knot. A small disappointment feels heavier than it should. These reactions come from the shadowed corners of your early world, where your understanding of yourself first took shape. Every choice you make is touched by this early understanding. You lean toward the familiar, even when the familiar hurts. You avoid the unknown, even when the unknown is the place where your freedom waits. You choose partners who mirror early figures in your life because the psyche longs to finish a story left incomplete. You say yes when you mean no because a younger part of you once learned that compliance meant safety. You say no when you mean yes because closeness once carried risk. The adult sees the situation. The child sees the memory. And the memory speaks first. In this way, your childhood becomes a living presence inside you. Not a ghost, not a wound, but a reservoir of symbolic meaning. It speaks through the images that rise in your dreams and the impulses that surface when you are vulnerable. It speaks through the fears that seem irrational and the longings that feel ancient. You try to reason with these feelings as if they were recent, yet they come from a time when your psyche was still forming its first map of what it means to exist. They are not logical because they were never meant to be. They were meant to protect you. Your unconscious holds these early impressions in a landscape of symbols. A dark forest where you once felt alone. A locked door that no one opened. A small light you followed to feel safe. A mirror you avoided because you did not yet know who you were supposed to be. These images appear again in adulthood, not as memories but as emotional patterns. You do not see the forest or the mirror or the door, yet you feel them. When something feels too overwhelming, the old forest rises. When someone ignores your truth, the old mirror appears. When love feels uncertain, the old door closes. The symbolic world becomes the hidden architecture of your choices. There is a sacred intelligence in this. The psyche remembers what you have forgotten. It stores your early wounds not to punish you, but to guide you back to integration. Your reactions are not flaws. They are messages. They tell you where the truth is still asleep. They tell you where the child still sits in the dark waiting to be understood. When you feel sudden fear, something ancient is trying to speak. When you feel disproportionate anger, a younger voice is trying to defend itself. When you feel unexplainable longing, the first version of you is reaching out, asking to be held by the person you have finally become. This is why patterns repeat. Not because you are broken, not because you are weak, but because the unconscious is trying to finish what was left unfinished. It brings you back to the same emotional crossroads again and again. Not to imprison you, but to offer you a new choice. The pattern continues until the child inside feels seen. Until the story finds a different ending. Until the river changes its course and opens a new path through the trees. Your childhood still speaks because it carries the blueprint of your earliest truth. Before the world taught you who you should be. Before fear shaped your instincts. Before you built the walls that now keep you from your own depth. The child inside you is not a relic. It is a guide, a torch hidden in the night, a quiet flame that refuses to die. It remembers something you lost along the way, something essential, something that your adult self is finally strong enough to reclaim. Let yourself sense it. Let yourself feel the river moving beneath the surface. Let yourself step back into that inner forest where your earliest story began. not to relive it, but to walk through it with the presence you did not have then. There is truth waiting in that landscape, a truth that will change the way you choose, a truth that will show you which voice belongs to the past and which one belongs to the life you are ready to create. Hold this awareness gently, as if carrying a small light through the dark. It will guide you into the next part of your journey. You feel the shift first in your body, a subtle tightening in the chest, a small drop in the stomach, a familiar pull that does not match the moment unfolding in front of you. It is almost imperceptible until you notice the way your breath changes, the way your shoulders rise, the way your eyes search for something you cannot name. These sensations come like a quiet visitor from another time. You try to explain them through logic, yet they do not obey the logic of adulthood. They obey the memory of a moment when you were small, delicate, unguarded. A moment when you learned, without choosing to learn, what the world felt like. The body remembers before the mind. It carries echoes of early nights when you waited for a voice that never came. It carries the warmth of a smile that made you feel safe. It carries the cold silence that taught you to shrink your truth. These echoes live in your skin, in your pulse, in the instinct that makes you step forward or retreat. When someone speaks with a certain sharpness, the air around you thickens. When someone withdraws their affection, a small panic rises. When someone sees you too clearly, another part of you trembles. These reactions come not from the present event, but from an old inner script that was written before you knew what scripts were. You walk through your days thinking you are reacting to what stands in front of you, yet your reactions are shaped by unfinished stories, by the sound of a door closing, by a gaze that once felt heavy, by a moment when you realized that love was not guaranteed. You grew around these impressions like a tree that bends toward the light available to it. The shape you took made sense then. It helped you survive. It helped you understand a world too large to hold. Now, as an adult, you continue to bend in the same direction without noticing that the light has changed. Your psyche holds these early moments like symbols pressed into clay. They rise again when life touches a similar place. You feel it when you hesitate to voice your needs. You feel it when you downplay your feelings to keep the peace. You feel it when you chase affection from people who cannot meet you. These patterns are not random. They are bridges to an earlier time. They appear when something inside you is trying to speak, when the child within wants you to turn back and listen. And each sensation is a doorway, a quiet threshold into the deeper forest of your unconscious. Inside that forest, your younger self waits, not as a memory, but as a living presence. It sits beside the river of your emotions and watches how you navigate your life. It notices when you abandon yourself. It notices when you silence your truth. It notices when you choose people who echo your earliest wounds. It watches with a mix of longing and fear, longing for you to finally see it, fear that you will walk past it again. This inner child is not weak. It is not broken. It carries the original blueprint of your sensitivity, the first flame of your intuition, the earliest form of your desire for connection. When you experience disproportionate pain, it is the child speaking. When you feel sudden shame, it is the child shrinking. When you feel overwhelming longing, it is the child reaching. These are not signs of fragility. They are signals sent from the depths of your unconscious, signals that invite you to pause, to breathe, to listen. Beneath every reaction lies a hidden memory. Beneath every fear lies an unspoken truth. Beneath every hesitation lies a part of you that once needed protection and never received it. The child learned to adapt. Now the adult must learn to understand. You are not meant to silence this inner voice. You are meant to translate it, to hold it gently, to walk with it through the dark forest of your history until you reach the clearing where the original wound was formed. The psyche repeats patterns not as punishment, but as guidance. It brings you to the same emotional landscape so that you may see it with new eyes. The forest is the same, yet you are different. The child once walked alone. The adult does not have to. This is the beginning. The moment when you realize that your reactions are not flaws but maps. Each one leads you deeper. Each one opens another door. And you step through slowly, sensing the soft presence of the child walking beside you as the inner forest grows quiet, waiting for what comes next. There is a moment when you begin to sense that your inner landscape is not made of memories, but of living symbols that rise and fall like shadows in a quiet room. You feel the shift when you stand at the edge of a choice and notice a familiar tension tugging at your thoughts. It feels like walking through a dim corridor where old echoes linger. You know the way forward, yet something pulls you back toward an older truth. A truth learned before you could understand what learning meant. This is the realm where the unconscious speaks in images rather than words. A realm where your childhood shaped the language your soul still uses to interpret the world. You see it when you repeat patterns that no longer serve you. Not because you want to suffer, but because your psyche is trying to resolve a story left unfinished. You choose the same kind of partner, the same emotional dynamic, the same invisible contract you made long ago. You recreate the same distance you once felt. You chase the same warmth you once missed. These repetitions are not failures. They are echoes of an inner myth that has not yet reached its final chapter. The unconscious invites you back into these scenes so you can see them with new awareness, not through the frightened eyes of the child who endured them. In this inner space, you are both the wanderer and the witness. You walk through a symbolic forest shaped by your earliest experiences. The trees carry the weight of every unspoken need. The air holds the scent of forgotten longing. The ground beneath your feet remembers the moments when you stood alone in the dark. And yet, there is light filtering through the branches. A light that was not there when you were small. A light that comes from the awareness you hold now. The forest has not changed. You have. The shadow appears here too. Not as an enemy, but as a guide. It carries the pieces of yourself you abandoned because they were too heavy to hold. It carries your anger, your unmet desires, your unspoken truths. It carries the voice you silenced to keep the peace. The shadow does not want to harm you. It wants to bring you back to wholeness. Yet it speaks with the intensity of everything you once suppressed. When it rises, it can feel overwhelming. You feel agitation, defensiveness, the urge to withdraw or attack. These reactions point toward the places where the child once felt unsafe. The shadow protects what the child once feared to reveal. You begin to understand this when you watch your patterns with a softer gaze. When you notice the way your body stiffens around certain people. When you see how quickly you retreat from the possibility of being truly seen. When you recognize the subtle instinct to dim your light so others will not pull away. These moments are mirrors. They reflect not who you are now, but who you believed you had to be. The child learned that certain emotions were too much. The adult reenacts that belief without realizing it. You hide joy because it once felt unsafe. You hide pain because it once went unanswered. You hide truth because it once caused rupture. Inside this symbolic world, every reaction becomes a temple door. You approach it with hesitation. You sense something sacred behind it, something fragile, something ancient. This inner temple holds the earliest image of yourself, the first version of your identity, the first shape your heart took when it tried to make sense of love. When you push against this door, you feel the resistance of years. Yet when you lean in with gentleness, it begins to open, and inside, you find the child who has been waiting for you to return. This encounter is not dramatic. It is quiet, almost like recognizing your reflection in still water. The child looks at you with a gaze that holds equal parts fear and hope. It remembers your early pain. It remembers the nights when you were overwhelmed. It remembers the way you tried to protect yourself. It remembers every moment you felt small, and it waits to see whether you will turn away again. Your presence is the answer. Simply staying, simply listening, simply acknowledging what was never acknowledged before. In this moment, something begins to shift. You feel a softening around the places where your patterns once held you tightly. You see that your defenses were not weaknesses, but expressions of wisdom formed long before you had language. You understand that the choices you make now carry the weight of a child who once tried to survive using the only tools available. And as you witness this truth, a new path begins to form. Not outside of you, but within you. A path shaped by awareness rather than fear. You step into this path slowly. You feel the light of the inner temple warm your chest. You sense the presence of the child walking beside you. The forest grows less threatening. The shadows become guides instead of warnings. The river beneath your emotions begins to flow with clarity rather than confusion. Something sacred is unfolding. Something long delayed. Something essential to your becoming. You're not the same as you were when you first entered this inner landscape. And the deeper you go, the more the unconscious begins to reveal the truth that waits in the next stage of your journey. There comes a point when the symbols that once felt distant begin to speak with startling clarity. You feel it in the quiet moments when the world around you softens, and your inner world rises like mist from a hidden lake. You notice it when you sit alone and a memory surfaces without warning. Not a visual memory, but a feeling, a tone, a faint tremor in the chest that tells you something old is ready to be seen. This is the moment when the unconscious no longer whispers through reactions alone. It steps forward through insight. It reveals the thread that connects your choices to the child who first shaped them. You begin to see how much of your life has been an attempt to resolve a story that never belonged to the present. You chased approval from people who reminded you of early figures who never gave enough. You avoided confrontation because conflict once meant danger. You clung to relationships that felt familiar because the familiar once meant survival. These patterns are not coincidences. They are the psyche's way of pulling you toward healing through repetition. And now, as you stand on the threshold of deeper awareness, the pattern becomes visible. The forest that once felt overwhelming shows its map. The river that once carried you now reveals its source. In this clarity, you watch your past self move through your present life. You see the child hiding behind your hesitation. You see the child shrinking behind your self-doubt. You see the child reaching through your longing. These inner movements are not imaginary. They are the emotional fingerprints of moments that shaped your earliest understanding of love. The adult you has spent years disguising these imprints as personality, preference, instinct. Yet when you look closely, you feel the original wound beneath them. Not as a sharp pain, but as a gentle ache. A call to return. A call to listen. A call to stay. As you stand in this inner landscape, something powerful begins to unfold. You feel the weight of your defenses, but you also sense their purpose. They shielded what was too fragile to bear. They carried what your young heart could not hold. They taught you how to navigate a world that did not yet know how to hold your depth. These defenses become less like walls and more like guardian figures. Shadows that once frightened you now appear as protectors who work tirelessly to keep you safe. Their intensity makes sense. Their rigidity makes sense. Their persistence makes sense. You feel gratitude rising where shame once lived. The inner forest transforms here. The trees that once loomed overhead straighten into quiet sentinels. The air grows lighter, as if dawn were approaching. You sense the presence of your younger self more clearly, not in fear but in recognition. The child is not hiding anymore. It stands in front of you holding all the pieces you abandoned along the way. The boldness you dimmed, the tenderness you defended, the creativity you buried, the trust you withheld. All of it waits in small hands that tremble with uncertainty. The child wonders if you will take these pieces back. It wonders if you are finally ready. When you reach for these pieces, your breath changes. You feel a warmth spreading through your chest like the glow of a fire in a quiet night. Taking these pieces is not nostalgia. It is reclamation. You are reclaiming the parts of yourself that never had the chance to grow. You are reclaiming your capacity for joy, your capacity for connection, your capacity for vulnerability. You are reclaiming the instinct to trust your own heart. These qualities were not lost. They were paused, held in safekeeping, waiting for the moment when you would be strong enough to carry them forward without fear. With this reclamation, a profound recognition rises in you. The choices you made throughout your life were not signs of weakness, but expressions of an unfinished dialogue between you and your earliest self. You were searching for resolution, searching for reflection, searching for a way to rewrite the unspoken rules that shaped you. And now, standing in this symbolic space, you realize that the dialogue can continue in a new direction. The child is no longer trapped in silence. The adult is no longer bound to repetition. The river that once carried your unconscious patterns begins to shift its course. As this shift deepens, you feel yourself move into a new kind of awareness. A calm presence settles inside you, like standing at the center of a temple built from your own inner work. The child steps beside you, no longer afraid. The shadow rests behind you, no longer resisting. The forest around you becomes alive with light filtering through leaves that sway gently in a rising breeze. Every symbol converges. Every memory softens. Every pattern opens. Something in you expands beyond the old map, reaching toward a horizon that feels both familiar and entirely new. This is the moment before transformation, the quiet inhalation before a new breath of life, the threshold between who you were and who you are becoming. The unconscious no longer pulls you backward. It begins to open forward. The child no longer pleads for safety. It begins to trust your presence. And you begin to sense, with a depth you have never felt before, that your next chapter will not be shaped by fear, but by the awareness that is now unfolding inside you. There is a quiet unfolding inside you, a slow rising of awareness that feels like dawn touching the edge of a long night. Everything you have walked through, everything you have uncovered, begins to gather into a single breath. You feel the presence of your younger self near the center of your chest. You feel the shadow no longer as a threat, but as a companion that has carried your forgotten truths. You feel the inner forest around you shifting its shape. The darkness thins. The trees open their branches to let more light through. What once felt like a maze begins to feel like a sacred passageway carved by your own becoming. As this inner world transforms, something in you loosens. The old tension that once lived beneath your choices begins to soften. You realize that your patterns were never signs of failure, only signals from the unconscious calling you home. The river beneath your emotions flows with new clarity. What once felt like confusion becomes direction. What once felt like fear becomes recognition. What once felt like repetition becomes invitation. You sense that the child inside you is no longer waiting in silence. It walks beside you with a trust that grows with every step you take. You move through this landscape with a gentleness that was not available to you before. You know now that every moment of hesitation came from a place that once needed protection. You know now that every surge of longing came from a truth that wanted to be heard. You know now that every shadowed reaction was an echo of love that never found words. These realizations do not arrive as thoughts. They arrive as warmth, a slow rising heat in the chest that feels like a small fire awakening after years of embers. You breathe into it, and the flame grows steadier. The symbols around you reveal their deeper meaning. The forest represents the unknown parts of your psyche you once feared to enter. The river represents the emotional memory that has shaped your inner world. The mirror represents the way you learned to see yourself through the eyes of others. The temple represents your inner truth, waiting to be acknowledged. Each symbol has guided you, even when you did not notice its presence. They appear again now, but illuminated from within. The forest glows with clarity. The river reflects the sky. The mirror shows your true face. The temple door remains open. You sense your childhood voice blending with your adult presence. Not as a conflict, but as a union. You no longer push it away. You no longer fear its needs. You no longer mistake its fear for weakness. You feel the two versions of yourself moving closer, merging into a single current of awareness. The child brings innocence. The adult brings strength. Together they form the self, a center that holds everything without breaking. This inner union is not a dramatic moment. It is a soft convergence that feels like exhaling after years of holding your breath. The river within begins to flow toward a wider horizon. The child does not guide you anymore. It walks with you. The shadow no longer blocks your path. It guards the truth you have reclaimed. The forest no longer hides your fears. It becomes the place where you find your intuition. These shifts happen quietly, like light slowly filling a dark room. You feel the transformation not through sudden clarity, but through a deep sense of rightness. As if the pieces of your life have been gently rearranged into the shape they were always meant to hold. You begin to understand that your choices can now rise from a different place. Not from old wounds, not from fear, not from the echoes of silence that once shaped you. Your choices can rise from awareness, from presence, from the inner light that has been growing inside you with every step into the unconscious. You feel this light expanding through your body, moving through your breath, touching the spaces that once felt heavy. The fire you reclaimed warms the parts of you that were once cold. The child inside you watches this light and smiles with a quiet relief. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of a new way of inhabiting your own life. You do not erase the past. You integrate it. You do not silence the child. You listen. You do not banish the shadow. You understand it, and in doing so, you create an inner world where all your parts can coexist without fear. You create a space where your choices are not shaped by survival, but by truth. You create a life that grows from the center rather than from the wound. You stand in the heart of this symbolic landscape as the light deepens around you. The trees hum with calm. The river glows with reflection. The temple breathes with an ancient stillness. And you feel yourself aligning with something vast, something patient, something profoundly yours. The self rises like a sun inside you. Not loud, not blinding. A quiet dawn that touches everything with warmth. And in this warmth, your past softens. Your present opens. Your future expands. You are ready to return from this inner journey carrying everything you have reclaimed. You walk back with a steadier presence. You walk back with a clearer breath. You walk back with the child beside you, the shadow behind you, and the light of your own awareness guiding the way. And as you cross the threshold into the next part of your life, something inside you whispers a truth you can finally hear. You were never meant to abandon who you were. You were meant to become whole. You return to yourself slowly, as if waking from a dream that was not truly a dream, but a memory of your own soul speaking in symbols. The forest fades, yet its wisdom remains. The river quiets, yet its clarity flows through you. The child retreats into the gentle space of your heart where it finally feels seen. The shadow settles into its rightful place as a silent guardian, and the inner temple glows with the soft radiance of a truth you had long forgotten. You carry all of this with you now, not as weight, but as warmth. You feel the shift in your breath. Your chest moves with an ease that was not there before. Something in you has softened, something has opened, something has aligned. You realize that you are not walking away from the past, but walking with it in a new way. The child no longer pulls your choices from the shadows. The adult no longer ignores the voice that once protected you. They move together, two currents of the same river, flowing in harmony toward a future shaped by presence rather than repetition. You begin to sense the world around you differently. The small tensions that once controlled your reactions now dissolve before they take hold. The echoes of old wounds no longer push your decisions. You hear them, but their voices are gentler. You feel them, but their urgency is gone. They have been witnessed. They have been understood. They have been welcomed home. And with this welcome comes the quiet power to choose from a deeper place. A place rooted in awareness. A place shaped by truth. A place untouched by fear. You carry the inner symbols with you as guides. When confusion rises, you will feel the forest. When emotion surges, you will hear the river. When doubt appears, you will see the mirror. When truth calls, you will find the temple door open. These images are not fantasies. They are languages of the unconscious that now speak through your intuition. They will remind you to return to yourself, to breathe, to listen, to stay present with the parts of you that once felt alone. Over the next days, you may notice subtle shifts. A hesitation that used to trap you may dissolve. A reaction that once overwhelmed you may soften into understanding. A longing that once felt painful may open into tenderness. These shifts are signs that the child within you trusts your presence. Signs that the shadow recognizes your strength. Signs that the unconscious has accepted your invitation to dialogue rather than to push you through old patterns. Let these changes unfold without force. Let them rise like quiet ripples across still water. You do not need to rush anything now. You do not need to prove anything. You do not need to fix what is not broken. Your task is gentler, to observe yourself with compassion, to notice the small movements of your inner world, to recognize when an old voice speaks, and to answer it with the presence you did not have before. This awareness will guide you more faithfully than any rule or method ever could. It will show you which choices come from wholeness and which come from fear. It will lead you forward with a clarity that feels like standing in early morning light. As you move on from this moment, remember that nothing inside you is your enemy. The child is not your weakness. The shadow is not your flaw. The past is not your prison. They are all threads of the same tapestry, woven into the person you are becoming. You honor them by listening. You honor them by breathing. You honor them by choosing gently. And in that gentleness, you find the beginnings of peace. You walk now with a quieter heart, a steadier presence, a softer gaze toward yourself and others. You carry the memory of your inner journey like a lantern, casting warm light on every step you take. You no longer move through life alone. The child walks with you. The shadow walks behind you. The self rises within you like a calm sun that never burns, only warms. And as you take your next breath, you feel a truth settle into your body with the softness of a final whisper. You are whole.